Hello and welcome to another episode of Name on the Trophy, the Manchester United podcast and YouTube show, bringing you the very best analysis of United and potential transfers. And that's what's on our agenda today. We're looking at defensive future transfers and central defensive in particular. My name is Dominic Booth. I am joined as ever by my reliable, I'm going to say cohort, Alex Wylie. Alex, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. The same can't be said about United themselves, but I'm doing all right.
Yeah, we're still very much in mourning after the 7-0, but shoots of recovery anyway. And yeah, we're looking at the long term in this podcast anyway. So we're all about the project on Name on the Trophy rather than being reactive, I suppose. And that's the name of the game today, Alex, with this podcast and sort of looking at how United's central defence situation might develop over the coming months.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the centre of United's defence is quite unbalanced at the moment in terms of profile, and still has quite a lot of room for improvement. So I think this will make for quite an interesting podcast.
Yeah, well, it's probably best to start with the current situation and talk about Ten Hag's current options and how he sort of assesses them and judges them compared to each other. Very much that Rafael Varane and Lisandro Martinez are the top choices in central defence. That's pretty much been the case from the start of the season. I know Martinez has a slightly tricky start, but has really established himself since then. And Varane, after that debut season, where injury really sort of set him back, we didn't see the best of Varane. We didn't see the Varane that everyone knew from Real Madrid after he'd been, a really sort of significant signing for United in 2021. Those two that have established themselves and really complement each other as the first choice pairing, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do. It's almost like a classic little and large combination that you have as two strikers, but we've got it as two centre backs, which is I don't think any other club really has that. But yeah, you're right in terms of profile. Where one's strength is the other's weakness, and vice versa. So you got Varane, who is, as we spoke about previously, very good in the air, wins 3 out of 4 of his aerial duels, which puts him in like the top 1 or 2% of centre backs in European football. And the flip side, you got Martinez, who isn't so good in the air. He wins 1 and 2. But then Martinez is a lot more aggressive on the ground. In fact, he's a lot more aggressive than almost all of our centre backs, whilst Varane is fairly passive. So when you've got one centre back doing one job and then one does the other, it's quite a nice combination to have. And I think it's a combination that United can bank on, barring any injuries to Varane. It's a centre back partnership that United can bank on for a few years, I think.
Yeah, and it's clear that Ten Hag wanted that combination of a right footer and a left footer, and maybe, like you say, the little and large aerial prowess on one side and aggression on the ground on the other. But he doesn't have quite the backup for both those exact roles, does he? I mean, it was the Maguire Lindelof partnership that preceded these two, and I kind of used to think with that partnership that they didn't complement each other. They seem to have similar weaknesses. They seem to be slow on turn and sort of easy to get at when they were turned towards their own goal. And United would get exposed when they had to play a high line against some of the lesser teams. With that combination, they were quite effective against the better sides when United could sit deep and counter attack, because Maguire, I think, is a good defender with the game in front of him. Lindelof as well. Lindelof and Maguire both quite decent at passing it out from the back as well. So you think that Ten Hag really has to, or would like to, change the picture in terms of his reserve options and the ones pushing Varane and Martinez, because it was quite stark to me when Martinez was unavailable after the World Cup with Argentina. He was still recuperating and United wanted a left-sided centre-back, that Ten Hag actually went with Luke Shaw rather than play either Maguire or Lindelof on that left-sided role, because he just thought that Luke Shaw was a better complement to Varane.
Yeah, the left-sided, right-sided thing, United need somebody to back up Martinez on that left-hand side. At the simplest level, if you're looking at our centre-backs, Ten Hag clearly values being a left-footed left-sider very highly. The Luke Shaw situation is a prime example of that. So I think he will be very keen on bringing in someone who can play on that left-hand side, and possibly someone who has a similar skill set to Martinez. So that was my thinking going into the options, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. My thinking was he wants a left-sided player who offers similar things to what Martinez does, which is aggression, as you said, and phenomenal ball progression as well, both in terms of carrying it and in particular his passing. So yeah, I think that's the first thing that United need to resolve. And then the second thing they need to resolve will be what they do with that right side, because we've got so many players now that fit in that right side. You've got Varane, you've got Lindelof, you've got Maguire. I know he plays on the left, but he's right-footed, and I think for that reason alone, Ten Hag
Ten Hag sees him, as a right-sided player, doesn't he? He hasn't really played him on the left, even though Solskjaer played him exclusively on the left. It was quite a strange change, an unexpected change, although kind of makes sense in hindsight.
Yeah, and when Maguire is playing on the left of the back two, he would offer ball progression, but it wasn't with his passing so much, because the ball was often coming onto his weaker foot. It was actually with carrying the ball forward, which he's actually quite good at. When he's on the right, he tends to be more progressive with his passing rather than his carrying. So yeah, that's 3 players. And then Tuanzebe as well, that's 4. It's starting to get to a point where there's a real unbalance in the options that we've got. And there's too many players. I mean, we play with a back 4 almost all the time, apart from when we're trying to close a game out in the final 5 or 10 minutes. So really, I think you want 4 or 5 options, maybe 2 left footers, 2 right footers, and maybe a very young one coming through. Right now, that's all out of whack. It really does need shoring up.
I can't believe you missed out Eric Bailly and Phil Jones when talking about United's right-sided centre options as well.
Well,
I mean, Bailly remains one of my favourite ever United players, purely for his moments of hilarity that he provided on the pitch.
Yeah, there's also Phil Jones. His injury record goes without saying, is terrible. But Bailly as well, too many injuries to be someone that you can rely on. And yeah, I'm still slightly worried that Varane is kind of close to that, because he's had a lot of injuries since he's joined United. But those two, Phil Jones and Bailly, I think we need to draw a line under them, unfortunately. And Bailly, I think, could be a very good centre-back at another club if he stays fit and irons out some of the craziness from his game. Phil Jones, I suspect, might retire at the end of this season. His injury record is that bad.
Yeah, Bailly just had that propensity to put his head where it would inevitably get hit by something, the ball or someone else's foot, or put himself in harm's way. Remains my fiance's favourite United player as well, I should say. But we should get onto that right-sided issue. I think that's an important one, because you say there's so many options, and I kind of want to talk about Maguire as well, because I really don't think he's been the disaster that some people think that he has been. And this constantly gets brought up whenever you and I go to Old Trafford and Maguire is playing. The guy can't do anything without incurring the wrath of the crowd. He'll make an average sideways pass and people will be groaning. And I kind of feel sorry for him, because the weight of his transfer fee is clearly playing a part. £80 million. He's not an £80 million footballer. He never was. That's not his fault that United paid that. And for a time, I thought he was a really decent centre-back for United. And if it wasn't for that price tag, I think he could still be a good third-choice centre-back for the club. I just kind of think that he needs to move on for his own sake, for a clean break in his career. And I think he could go to a very, very decent club and prove his quality, as he's done for England over the past few years. There's been absolutely no problem with his performances at international level. What do you make of the Maguire situation?
I agree. I think he's become a scapegoat for our bad performances, whilst other players have got off scot-free. And I'm smiling because I say scot-free because players like Scott McTominay, who I don't think are anywhere near the level that United are at or want to be, no one talks about him. But Maguire, as you said, every single touch, even when he comes on as a sub, everyone around you starts groaning, sighing. And this is a centre-back who I think was in the World Cup Team of the Year. He was certainly in the Euros Team of the Year for England.
Yeah. Yeah, both.
He is a very good centre-back. And at United, it's almost like when he comes on, he's overcompensating because he gets really tight to defenders who turn him quite easily, but that's not his skill set. Maguire is fairly slow. He turns like a lorry. He's a centre-back who needs to sit off, to be honest, win his aerial duels. He's very good in possession, good at carrying it out. But when he's at United, I feel like he overcompensates and he tries to get too tight and he tries to win an early tackle. And then that almost inevitably goes wrong. And then United fans get more annoyed and it compounds. The Maguire, I think, should go. I think for his career, he should go. And I suspect that wherever he goes next, he will look very good. And there will be United fans saying, oh, why didn't we see this Harry Maguire at United? When we've always had that player, you just got to support him.
Yeah, sometimes I do think that sometimes it's the United factor in that playing a 6 out of 10 game for United is not good enough. Whereas you can play that same game for another side and look fairly good. And your mistakes at United are just massively scrutinized and they'll get plastered over the media and social media. Whereas if you make that mistake for Leicester or a club further down the league, I know it from working in the media, you don't cover those events the same way that you would cover a Manchester United nightmare in defence. United concede 4, 5, 6, or dare I say it, 7 in a game. That goes everywhere. And other teams, it simply doesn't. That's the truth.
My one counter argument to that would be the fact that he's put in very good performances in a World Cup and in the Euros, where you could argue that's one of the few things in football that gets more media attention than United. I mean, you might dispute that, but
I would dispute that actually. Yeah, but
that's incredible. But the fact that he's putting in good performances at that high of a level suggests to me it's not the weight of playing for Man United or the scrutiny. It's more specific to the actual club itself. And I do put a fair bit of blame at the door of United fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why my next point was going to be that I think Lindelof would be the player that I would keep if we're looking at this situation where United need a reserve right-sided centre-back to support Varane. I think Lindelof would accept the role and would thrive in it. I think he's a perfectly respectable centre-back, Victor Lindelof. I don't think he's outstanding. Still only 28. I think he's done a pretty solid job for United without ever really looking like a completely elite centre-back. But if he was the one to back up Varane, and if United signed a backup for Martinez and Maguire left the club, I think that would be absolutely fine from my perspective this summer.
Yeah, I agree. I've got backups for Varane that United could get in the transfer market, but it's not high priority. I think, as you said, if Harry Maguire was to leave and then having Lindelof as the number 2, I think he would, like you said, be happy to do that. And like, he's 28, he's still got 3-4 more years in him. That is probably the decision I would make. I would leave Lindelof as the backup. As a centre-back, Lindelof's a funny one because I very rarely watch a game and think yeah, Lindelof was fantastic.
Yeah.
But I also conversely never watch a game and think, oh, Lindelof was terrible. He's an odd player. Like I was looking at the stats, and I feel at this point should say that defensive stats tend to be more descriptive than a centre back that makes a lot of tackles is not necessarily a good centre back. It just means they're more of an aggressive centre back. There tends to be no correlation with tackle numbers, interception numbers, you name it, and actually winning football games. So I just want to say that before I move on. Lindelof is not aggressive whatsoever. I think he's in the bottom 5% for tackles in the European leagues. He doesn't tend to make a lot of interceptions. He's very good at keeping the ball. His pass completion, I think, is like in the top 4% in Europe. And then he also doesn't really offer any attacking sort of goal scoring threat, which Maguire does, to be fair to him. So with Lindelof, I think you've got someone who is maybe a mid to upper Premier League standard centre back whose transfer fee and profile would allow him to be a number 2 without it being too heavily scrutinized. So I think in that sense, it works. Yeah, I think that does work.
Yeah, and I know you've got a name on your list you've got 2 names on your list, haven't you? One as a potential right-sided signing and one as a left-sided signing. So who is I've also got 3 names that I've gleaned from the media, basically, that United have looked at and have been interested in recent years. But who is your right-sided option who United could sign, I guess, in an extreme scenario where both Maguire and Lindelof went, or if they wanted to replace one of them?
Yeah, so going into this, my thinking was to have centre-backs that offer similar things to what Varane offer and to what Martinez offer. So I used the Sabr Sports Player ID Pro app to give myself a list of centre-backs, and then I further filtered them down based on attributes that I think matched up with, for example, Varane. So I had a long list of right-sided centre-backs, all 26 and under, that were good enough for the Premier League. And the one that jumped out as someone who would be willing to be the sort of apprentice to Varane, offer similar things to Varane in terms of being very good in the air, was Nicola Maleskovic at Fiorentina. So he is 25 years old, right-sided centre-back, tall. I think he's over 190. I think he's about 195 centimeters. Strong, very good in the air. He wins 71% to Varane's 75%. He's a bit more aggressive than Varane, makes a few more fouls, likes to push up quite tight to the opposition, and also offers quite a nice goal scoring threat, which Varane doesn't quite offer. I think his expected goals is 0.07, so expected to score 1 in 10. It doesn't sound great, but for a centre back, that is
not bad.
It's not bad. I mean, it's more like 1 in 15, but I digress. He offers an attacking threat, and I think that is someone that you could bring in who won't expect to be number 1 straight off the bat, but in a couple of years' time, as Varane's starting to get 31, 32, I can see Maleskovic being able to make that step up to be the first choice.
Yeah, very much I'm going to use the phrase Rolls Royce, but we discussed this before the podcast, whether a Rolls Royce is exclusively a tall centre back, which I think it is. You can't describe Lisandro Martinez as a Rolls Royce, however good he might be on the ball.
No, I've always thought as a Rolls Royce as someone who just is very calm in possession, clean in possession, like can bring the ball out nicely, which is Rio Ferdinand. Rio Ferdinand is the prime Rolls Royce player. But you're right, Rolls Royces tend to be quite big cars. So does it have to be? I
feel there's another podcast that we need to credit at this point, but we should move on. I do think that you're absolutely right that United need to be looking at the right-hand side, despite the Lindelof thing, because Varane's advancing years, maybe just one for them to keep an eye on, in my view, not for summer 2023, but maybe for 24.
Yeah, agreed.
Which is interesting because the right-sided name on my list in terms of players that United have really looked at and considered is Jurrien Timber, who is a slightly different profile, you would say. Comfortable playing at right back as well as in the centre, and I think he's fairly tall, but not the same height as Milenkovic for sure. More of a ball player really than a big lad.
Mm.
Do you see United looking at someone like Timber, or is it kind of filling a need that they don't really have at this point in time?
For me, Jurrien Timber is quite similar to Martinez in that he's technically very good, but is also, I think he is actually quite small. I'm pretty sure he's under 6 foot. I think he's
182, but
one.
I can't do the metric conversion.
That's
182.
funny. That's
I
funny
think it's
because
about
on
six
mine
foot.
it says 179, which is slightly
Oh
below
well,
6. I think 182.
Jurian's been cooking the books then maybe.
Yeah, Martinez has also discrepancies over his height that someone on social media pointed out to me when I put that up.
Those
But
under
yeah,
six
he's
footers have to do that, I'm afraid.
yeah. Well, I actually am 182, so I know that is 6 foot just about. But anyway, I digress again. Jurrien Timber is quite similar to Martinez in that he's very good on the ball, fairly aggressive, I would say, on the floor, but not particularly great in the air. And my thinking is you don't want two players like that, because I know I've spoken in previous podcasts about how aerials aren't the be all and end all. But I think if you have two centre backs, both of which could be targeted, it sort of compounds the issues. So for
Yeah,
me,
then you
I
go. Sorry.
yeah. So for me, unless you've got a left sider who is taller and then could work with Timber, then I can't really see it working. And on top of that, I think Timber wouldn't be happy being a number two. I think his profile is growing quite significantly, as you can see by the fees that were being mentioned last summer. So I don't see that one happening, or at least I wouldn't do that one.
No, it's just interesting that he was the player. It seemed to be him or Martinez that United were going to sign last summer. And given the left-footed argument, which I think is quite strong and has clearly paid off for not just United but for other clubs. I read a piece by Daniel Story this week about Arsenal and Arteta, who I think he signed Pablo Mari, who wanted to play as a left-sided centre-back, and then moved on to Gabriel, who's made the role his own this year. And then you look around the market at the likes of Guardiol, who's probably going to be on the move, and Chelsea signing Badashahil. There's loads of these left-sided centre-backs who are on the market, and United had Timber or Martinez as on their top two list last summer, which doesn't really add up to me. Maybe that speaks to something about United's recruitment policy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what it speaks to is that Ten Hag wanted a centre back who is A, used to the way that he likes to play, obviously, and B, very good at progressing the ball with their feet. And I think Timber was the first choice. And then when that fell through, he went for Martinez. I can't
Yeah,
see us having both. I think it was one or the other. And I suspect, I don't know, you might know better than me, but I suspect journalists are still linking us with him because we were so keen on him last summer. I
yeah.
can't see it being both. I just can't.
No, I also can't see him completely going off United's list. I think that he will be a player that Ten Hag keeps tabs on, and maybe until Timber gets a move somewhere else, somewhere else in the Premier League, perhaps then it might die down. But he's continued to be quite a star for Ajax, so it's not a surprise that United keep getting linked with him. As we come over to the left-sided issue, Alex, and there's a couple more players that I'm going to throw in who United have also been linked with to stay on that theme.
Mm-hmm.
Who they've looked at. I know for a fact that they've looked at Pau Torres pretty much ever since he starred in Villarreal's successful Europa League campaign, which culminated in that victory over United at the end of the 2021 season. Pau Torres, again, left-footed, ball player. One of these who I feel like has come so close to getting a big move to the Premier League or somewhere else, but it hasn't quite come off for him yet. But he's still only 26 and looks like he's got a lot going for him.
Yeah, Pau Torres is fairly similar to Varane in that he's tall. I wouldn't say he's the most aggressive or physical centre-back. He's fairly tidy in possession. He carries the ball out a bit better than Varane does. My issue with Pau Torres again is Pau Torres at 26 years old going to want to be an understudy to Martinez? I mean, he might come to United backing himself. I mean, footballers have tremendous confidence, but anyone who's got any idea of where United are at right now will see that Martinez is A, starting almost every single game, and B, is being rated very highly. I think any left-sided centre-back that comes in would have to be on the either have a lower profile or be a bit younger than Pau Torres. But don't get me wrong, I mean, Pau Torres is a very good centre-back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the same goes for David Carmo, who's the other one that United were briefly linked with and fulfills a similar brief as that left sider. And age profile absolutely perfect at 23. Really tall, sort of more of an aerial prowess. Carmo at Porto.
Yeah, so Carmo, he's a funny one because when he was at Braga, he was jumping out on stats lists as someone that could make a jump up to a top 5 European league. And I believe last summer went to Porto for like 20 odd million, I think he went for. He's got the kind of profile where I think he could come to United and be willing to be an understudy for the time being, with a view to maybe becoming the number one in a year or two. He's not quite as accomplished in possession as Martinez, but he is, like you said, very tall. He is quite physical. And I guess the question is, do you have someone like, I don't know, a profile similar to Timber backing up Varane, and then have someone like Carmo backing up Martinez, where they can kind of like slot in? I guess my
Mix
only
and
issue
match
is,
almost of the different profiles.
yeah, but then if like Martinez got injured, would it be Varane and Carmo? And then my concern would be their ability to progress the ball properly, because Varane's tidy, but he's not at the same level as Martinez, I think, at passing it out. So yeah, Carmo profile wise, I could see that working. He has only been at Porto for a year, so whether they'd be willing to let him go so quickly, I mean, maybe they would if the fee was right.
Yeah, I mean, those Portuguese clubs will often hold out for the right fee, won't they? And sell at the right time. Porto, Sporting Lisbon, Benfica, masters at that. I think that maybe when he was at Braga, that was the perfect time to bring him in as a young left-sided centre-back to grow into a first choice role, and just to be that third or fourth choice for the time being. I mean, looking at United's younger options at the moment coming through, there's probably not a huge amount. Ted and Mengi is the only one that did have a bit of a profile and that people were quite excited about, but he kind of appears to have stalled a little bit with his development. So, yeah, I think I do feel confident there will be a left-sided centre-back signing, whether it's somebody of the Torres really experienced and ready to go straight in and compete with Martinez profile, or someone younger. Remains to be seen. Who's the left-sided centre-back name on your list, Alex?
So the Sabr Sports player that I chose is someone who is young, like we spoke about, has probably a higher profile than Carmo. I mean, I was just looking at Carmo's playing stats for this season. Up until about October, November, played almost week in, week out, and has barely featured since. So getting a move to United seems unlikely. But yeah, he has a higher profile than Carmo, and he's more similar to Martinez. In fact, he's very similar to Martinez. And it's Facundo Medina at Lens. So he is 23 years old, left-sided centre-back, a little taller than Martinez. I think he's just about 6 foot, but he's not huge, not superb in the air. But what he is very, very good at is progressing the ball. I think he's in the top 1%. Well, I know he's in the top 1% for progressive passes. So he plays eight per 90. And he carries the ball out 3 times, progressive carries, which is also in the top 1%. And he's in the top 20% for assists, expected assisted goals, goals and expected goals. And he's in the top 2% for the amount of passes he plays. So, yeah, we're talking about a player who is very, very good at bringing the ball out. he also happens to be Argentinian and has just broken into the Argentina team. So if you are looking for like a fairly similar like for like, I think Medina is very similar. The one caveat to that is Martinez is nastier than Medina. Medina's, I'm not saying he's soft, but he's not got quite the level of nastiness that Martinez has. But yeah, Medina's been linked with quite a few smart clubs. I think Brighton and to a lesser extent Leeds have both been linked with him. And I think if United came through and said, look, you'll play a third of the games, you'll be a backup to Martinez. There's a chance in a couple of years you could be the number one. I think he'd be interested in that. I think that'd be quite a big step up from Lens, who are doing quite well this season. They're pushing for Champions League. But yeah, I think Medina would be certainly one that United should look at.
Lisandro Martinez 2.0 maybe with his profile and everything about him. And not many are tougher than Lisandro Martinez either, or nastier, as you put it. So we can let him off that, I think.
Yeah. But he is good. Like, he'll get a decent move, and it wouldn't surprise me if it is to the Premier League. He would look very good in the current Brighton team. I like him.
Yeah.
I like him a lot.
I suppose the caveat to all this we're talking about is United's transfer budget this summer, and it's probably important to end on that note where the takeover talk is going on. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know there's Qatari delegations in Manchester, I think, as we speak, to be honest, recording this on Thursday afternoon. So it'd be interesting how much budget is committed to defensive areas when, quite obviously the priority is going to be a striker, and may well also be a goalkeeper, and may also be a passing midfielder. So you might find that the left-sided centre-back is third or fourth down the priority list. Obviously, if United are taken over by the richest people in the Middle East, then maybe that won't be an issue. But it'll be interesting to watch out for sure.
Yeah. Look, if it's the Qataris, I could see it being done in the summer, to be honest. There'll be so much money available. The one caveat to that is the Qataris have not ran PSG particularly well, and have had they've liked to bring in shinier objects, let's say. So I could see them, United, bringing in like 3 very good strikers and just ignoring the defensive situation.
Yeah, I look forward to Messi, Mbappe, and Neymar all arriving in the summer then.
Yeah, and then having a midfield that, there's some players in it you've
Still
never even heard of
McTominay.
before. Yeah, like that. I don't think enough's been spoken about that, how badly PSG have actually been run, because I think a lot of United fans are quite keen on the idea of there being a lot of money for United to spend. Others, to be fair, not so keen because of the sport washing allegations and all that. But the one thing that hasn't really been spoken about is the Qataris have not ran PSG very well. They should be winning a league title every single season. That hasn't happened, and they should be competing for the Champions League at the very latter stages. And I think they've gone out in the quarters almost every season, it feels like. So
yeah,
not a well-run club whatsoever.
No, and there's no guarantee that wealth equals success in this world, and particularly with so many clubs, with spending power, and a lot of them run really well. I hate to say it, but the way Manchester City have been run in recent years has been an absolute example of how to use this money and how to spend it properly. And they sort of operate in a very calculated way across transfer windows, solving the issues that they feel need to be solved. So that is the way that, a future United owner, whoever that may be, needs to operate. And pretty much brings us to a close, though, Alex. It's been a really interesting one, kind of talking about an area that we haven't tapped into that much on the podcast before. So yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Like I said, I don't think this is something that will be done this summer, but like you said before, top clubs, they're planning 2 or 3 summers in advance all the time. That feels like something that United haven't done for 15 years. Not since Fergie was in charge have we actually done that. So it's important to have these conversations now as fans, but even more importantly, as as a club, United need to be having these conversations. So I hope that all the players we spoke about today, United are looking at and are making plans on what they want to do with them. So yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, we can but hope. Right, that pretty much concludes today's episode. You can find Name on the Trophy on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, and Alex's Sabr Sports is all over the socials as well, and keeps plugging that TikTok. It's still going strong, I believe. Sabr_sports. But from myself and Alex, thank you very much for listening. And we'll be back very, very soon. Cheers.